Hello, and welcome to the Project Good podcast. I'm your host, Annmarie Hylton. Project Good is a social impact podcast interviewing experts and advocates about the pressing problems that we face globally and hearing how they suggest we move forward in the future. The Project Good podcast is brought to you by Project Good Work. The goal of this podcast is to inspire people and organizations to develop a mindset that can move others to positive action regarding the complex social issues facing people and the planet. For February, we're focusing on ensuring racial equity in America. It's been a stormy few weeks since the inauguration with DEI rollbacks, mass deportation, tariffs, and protests. The 2024 presidential election marked an important checkpoint in American history, and the aftermath of this election is posed to change the political trajectory of the United States, influencing policies on issues like climate change, healthcare, economic reform, and social justice. During the race for the office for the president, key issues were brought up around voting rights and democracy and major social issues like reproductive rights, LGBTQ plus protections, gun control, and racial justice. The last few weeks have brought back memories of the gruesome history of America and its biggest internal war with itself about race, humanity, equality, equity, and what it means to be part of this country and how to make it. These current moods have left people feeling speechless and directionless. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Portia Allen Kyle, the interim executive director of Color of Change, a digital-first organization powered by millions of members nationwide, leveraging campaigns, organizing, and narrative pressure against government, corporations to act on real solutions for racial justice. In this capacity, she leads the organization's strategic advocacy and day-to-day operations. She previously served on the Biden administration appointee to Senior Advisor for Equity Policy and Stakeholder Engagement in the Office of Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Transportation under Secretary Pete Buttigieg. For over 15 years, Portia has spent her career advancing civil rights and civil liberties through a lens of racial equity by crafting innovative policy reports and solutions, building and supporting coalitions, and implementing legislative and stakeholder engagement strategies. She's also the author of Advice to Thrive By: How to Use Your Resume and Cover Letter to Build Your Brand and Launch a Dynamic Public Interest Career, a book aiming to demystify public interest career trajectories for law students and young attorneys. She's earned her JD from Rutgers Law School, her MA in African American Studies from Columbia University, and her BA in Africana Studies and Economics from Wesley College. Portia has been featured as a speaker and quoted in print by outlets including The Washington Post, Bloomberg Law, NBC News, and Associated Press, and many more. Let's get into the interview. Racial equity in America is a complex and evolving issue, and while progress has been made in certain areas, significant challenges remain. While legal discrimination has been outlawed, systematic racism persists in areas such as housing, healthcare, education, and the criminal justice system. For example, Black Americans are still more likely to face harsher sentences in the criminal justice system and have less access to quality healthcare. The racial wealth gap remains vast. On average, Black families have far less wealth than white families, which is partially due to historical factors like slavery, segregation, and discriminatory labor practices. This gap is reflected in disparities in home ownership, savings, and inheritance. The death of Black individuals like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor brought attention to police violence against Black communities, sparking nationwide protests and calls to reform. Despite some progress, such as police body cameras and calls for defunding or reimagining police forces, meaningful reform has been slow. Disparities in educational outcomes continue with Black students often attending schools that are underfunded and lack resources. There are also lower graduation rates and achievement gaps between Black students and their white peers. The fight for voting rights continues with ongoing battles over voter suppression, gerrymandering, voting laws that disproportionately affect Black and minority voters. Efforts to pass federal voting rights protections have faced challenges in Congress. Let's see how we can start getting a clearer picture with Color of Change Interim Director Portia Allen Kyle, who is an expert at understanding how law, society, and race all intertwine in America. Welcome, Portia.
Welcome. It is such a pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. And I think, obviously you are the perfect person to speak with as we not only are in this month. I would say we've just, passed the inauguration month. It's only been, we're on week 3. I feel like I'm in one of these D-Day movies where you count each day and and a stamp happens like, it was like day 1, day 2. So each day gets like a stamp. And so here we are now in a new month, February, and it's also Black History Month. I don't know, I guess, and race happens to also be on the table in this, change of the guard, change of administration. You are the perfect person to speak to because you were with the past administration and also have the expertise of dealing with the mix of these social, economic, and, political issues. So before, though, we get into looking at the quote-unquote mess that we are in, I would like to know a little bit about you personally and your heart as a human being. Most people, when they start to look at law, have different reasons why they go into law. And you, I would say, chose one of, a tough issue to battle within law. So why do you do what you do?
That is a great question. And, I really think there are a few things that both motivated me in ways that I probably didn't recognize when I was younger. My grandmother was fortunate enough to have attended college in the 40s. She went to Southern University. And in so many ways, that opportunity laid the groundwork for my family and later for me to dream about, what is possible and to, think about what is possible. And, to that end, also taking very seriously, what is the responsibility that we have to leave the world like better than we found it, and to leave this country better than we found it. And so, have been always looking to figure out how to contribute my skills for good, and particularly, for the good of Black people. And so, winding up at Color of Change, as this dynamic racial justice institution, is somewhat of a full circle, and, one that I continue to be excited about because, institutions like ours, organizations like ours, unapologetically Black founded, Black led, pursuing, racial justice, have a really critical place in the ecosystem and a really critical place that, especially as we're kicking off the days, right, into this like new world order that we find ourselves in here in this country, not taking for granted the role that we have to fight back, to, demand accountability, to find the joy, build relationships and organize in that joy, and to make a new tomorrow possible, both, for us now and for, those who will come after us. And so really just seeking to be a better ancestor than a defendant.
I love that. I love when people think about, the future generations and how they can not only set up the other generations to thrive, but serve as an example, and especially an example for motivating for goodness. Because the thing that, I don't even probably have to even say it, but the thing that we are missing is that everybody is just thinking about self these days. And And so to be a person to think beyond just, the here and now, and even deeper, because, you don't know who these ancestors are going to be, and, and what type of people they're going to be, but to plant that seed that, no matter what paths that, these future people take, that they had, someone that they can always look back to and say, okay, but, she did it. And so that means I can do it too. So I love that. I love when people, really think about themselves as, a seed, I guess, essentially, if I were going to put a picture to it, because, a seed, when you think about it, like an apple tree, right? It doesn't just give you one apple, it gives you many apples. So I love that. So let's, I guess, dive right into it. And the biggest thing, I don't know, I had to kind of, I guess maybe I'm emotionally sensitive, but I had to kind of turn off some of these news things when I saw people screaming because, their relative was being deported, or, especially when they were like young kids and, they're losing their parents. And so I was just like, I was horrified of what we're seeing. Like, I can't believe that we're witnessing this stuff, like, for real again. I just, it's, I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but to watch it is just, there's something inside of you that just, clicks really wrong. And so here we find ourselves once again facing this ongoing battle. And in a way, I have to confess, like, I do get exhausted a little bit with the racial issue, because I feel like it goes around and around and around and around, and we never quite just like get an understanding. So how would you, I guess, when we're starting to talk about this, I guess, what do you think America has to really do to confront this issue of race, like, for once and for all? Is there such a thing, or you think that's just a no-go?
So I think it's a complicated question, because we didn't get here overnight. We got here through, centuries of conscious affirmative decisions that have propped up, racist power structures, that have propped up, corporate exploitation and, profit at the expense of everybody else, that have, created the systems and the outcomes that we are seeing and that we have today. And I think the, administration is no different, from what happened when, collectively we decided to prioritize profit over people for an extended period of time. And, what that has looked like in a lot of different ways, whether it is through underinvesting or removing, money from our public education system, whether it is, the role of media in both complacency and mis and disinformation, whether it is the, proliferation of, technology, that is invaded every aspect of our, day-to-day lives. Like, all of these things are related, and, and race is, somewhat of a fabric and a story and an organizing principle here in the United States, that is really about power and who holds power, and, and how people wield it. And so in order to, I think, confront, not just the kind of question and the challenge of systemic racism, but really to demand actions and build the will, I think, we have to expose the harms. We have to build, power and like organize folks around real solutions. We have to stop accepting like solutions that are not real, and, stop subscribing to the exceptionalism, ideals, or that, because one person, or one company or, something have made it despite the odds, being stacked against them, that, it's evident or an excuse as to, why the system works, right? Or, why things are okay. I think we need to, accept at this stage in the game that what we have going on is not only not normal, but also not working. And then be in relationship, build stronger, relationships, and continue to, organize from the ground up, build power from the ground up to, push narratives and change stories. It's a part of the reason why Color of Change relies on both the power of people and the power of narrative to hold policymakers and corporate actors, feet to the fire on racial justice, is because we recognize the power of a story. And that, the power of a story in changing, somebody's mind and, making them see an issue differently and, making those connections. And we also recognize the power of stories in perpetuating a lot of the harms and the normalization of injustice that, happens around us. And so needing to take head on, the removal of harmful stories while also promoting and highlighting different stories of Black people, of Black life, of, Black communities and Black joy and success as a part of that recipe, to move forward down the line.
Yes, and changing the story. And one of the things I think, in these last, I guess, few weeks, I'm like, or days, I forget what day, because each day something has happened. But one of the biggest things that I think especially we talk about stories is the DEI, removal of DEI. I think a lot of people had a story specifically about DEI. They thought DEI was, focused on mostly helping Black people. But one of the things I think that people didn't understand was DEI was inclusive of not only Black people, but it was also inclusive of just women, whether they were Black or white. And so now I guess that perhaps people are waking up to see that everything really is intertwined, that we aren't just, I think people didn't understand, I guess, how things even affected them personally. That race is not pun intended and not pun intended in a way, just a black and white issue, that it really had gradations, and that it was affecting people that weren't necessarily looking at race. So should we be concerned now, I guess, that DEI is being removed from a lot of major companies, or that they are, it's not a major concern now that the new administration has put that into effect?
I mean, I think absolutely we should be concerned, but we shouldn't necessarily be concerned because of the merits of any particular DEI program at any given company, but more so because what is being attacked are the wins and gains of the civil rights movement, right? The gains of the civil rights movement, were all about unlocking opportunity, in doing so through protections for certain groups that had been historically, overlooked, excluded, locked out of system opportunities, both legally and in practice, for years upon years upon years, right? And so, providing those remedies, the the legal framework that allow for those gains, the non-discrimination and anti-discrimination causes for programs, and efforts like affirmative action that were, about offering redress where there had been demonstrable past actions that had, excluded Black people and others, women, et cetera, from various opportunities in public life. Those are the things that they are attacking. And I, don't know that it's necessarily because people don't understand the benefits of DEI. No one, goes this hard after something that is a complete failure. It just doesn't make sense. They're, attacking this. The right in particular, and those who are essentially neo-segregationists that are, looking to push a very clear agenda. And that agenda is all about emphasizing merit by eliminating civil rights and anti-discrimination protections. That agenda that they're pushing is about promoting misinformation under the guise of free speech. Like the agenda that these neo-segregationists are pushing are about peddling hate for profit and, seeing the, power and the incentive structure of, profit in a lot of these corporate actors, in addition to, them wanting to align with political power. And so, it's not just that the rollback of DEI programs themselves are troubling and problematic, but it's the rollback of these programs so publicly. There always was the option to just stop doing something and be quiet about it, like making public statements says a thing and signals, a thing and a shift in a belief, especially, in the political context we're in with this new administration. It also, many of these companies advertised and promoted their ESG, programs, their DEI programs, their ESG is environmental and social governance program, their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, and ways and practices and ways of doing business that they, made a lot of money on, right? And so if we think a company like Lowe's, for example, back in 2017 or 2018 during the first Trump administration, Trump had stood up a business council, and a lot of CEOs were on that business council. One of them was the CEO of Uber. Another was the CEO of Home Depot. And so folks began flocking to Lowe's as the more socially responsible company because the CEO was not on Trump's business council and, catering, to Trump during the first administration. And so, here we are a few years later after that kind of customer goodwill and belief of, Lowe's being the, kind of less Trumpy, more socially responsible alternative. Here they are announcing that they're backing away from, their DEI commitments and investments, et cetera. And so just, kind of share that example to say, it is somewhat about the particular program. Like, yes, we can debate the merits of diversity, but, what is really sought after by the right, by these neo-segregationists, is to take us back to an era before protections. And that's, not sending us back to Jim Crow. That's sending us back, to times in history prior.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I feel like we're like at the 60s, or maybe even before.
I mean, the
if
1890s.
we continue. Yeah. I'm like, if we continue even before. And here's the thing that because I was in preparing for this interview, I started looking at just like statistics of world, the minority, what we call the minority is actually the majority of the world. Even people don't want to face the facts. And then I was looking at things such as birth rate and what's going on. And so there is a decline, I guess, when it comes to even for Europe and for white Americans and birth rates and things like that. And so the reason that I'm bringing this up is that that there is, I'm just speaking in terms of looking at what's going on from a I guess continuation of generations from a Caucasian perspective. There's a decline in, I guess, the amount of people, even though right now, there's still obviously millions and millions of people, but with over time, if the trajectory continues, there's going to be less and less people who would be quote unquote considered white because the birth rate on that side is going down. So I started thinking, do you feel that, what's coming out is that there's this feeling of that whiteness is maybe under attack. Is that why we are experiencing this so direct and in your face?
I don't know that I would, say that whiteness is under attack. I mean, there are so many kind of metrics out there that substantiate and, support the idea that white supremacy, not only exists, but is, real, that, privilege and a lot of other factors and, our institutions and systems have, been built around ideas of whiteness and the superiority of whiteness that we should be completely dismantling, but we're not there yet. Like, there's still a number of metrics where through, disinvestment, through unearned access and opportunity, where we know whether folks feel aggrieved or not, where we know that, the outcome aren't necessarily matching the feeling, if that makes sense. But what I, would say is that, that's why we need to organize that come. And that, is why, as like people who believe in equity, people who believe in justice, people who believe specifically in racial justice, need to be of one accord, building relationships, building power, doing that kind of slow grind work of organizing and coming together, because this work is for the long haul. It's sometimes more convenient to think about gains and losses in the election cycle, but life is life, right? It's like over the progress and gains of the civil rights movement, for example, we're not necessarily just seen in the 4 years. Like, those gains have resonated and have been expanded. And I think it's, up to us to work actively towards building a world where our, children and grandchildren have more rights than we do, not fewer. And right now, with the direction and the trajectory that we are headed on, we are like quickly descending into a place where, our daughters will have fewer rights than their grandparents did. And I think we have to collectively decide that that's not okay and that's not the world we want to live in, and work to build something else.
Yes. And I have maybe a foolish question to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Why do you think that people do not want to, I guess, share power? Obviously, we've seen the movies with the villain that has control over everything, ha ha ha. But I would like to think that not everybody thinks that way.
But that's why power is so important, because, recognizing it or not, power is what allows you to write the rules. And so we see in this moment the blatant grab for power by this administration, by the billionaire class, by these corporations who are, who, number one, invested in the past election cycle like their lives depended on it, because in their minds it did, right? Like, dumping hundreds of millions of dollars. I believe, the figure for, how much money spent in this past election was around $500 million. Well, what's $500 million to a multi-billionaire, right?
Yeah.
And I think, that's the fallacy. While, the emphasis for so many is the messages out there often being sent to Black people, or particularly around the economy, are around wealth building, build wealth, close the racial wealth gap. And, it's not that those things are not important, but kind of putting it in context. If wealth was enough, we wouldn't see billionaires and, corporate oligarchs looking to take over the government for power. Right? And so power then has to be the center of the conversation. It has to be the organizing principle, and building power to demand racial justice, building power to demand solutions, building power to, fight for a world that is, different for tomorrow than it is for today, and certainly better than yesterday, has to be the pathway. And power is, power is powerful, right? And it's not about presence. And I think, that is where Folks who are opposing DEI are, wanting to somewhat use the language of presence when actually what they are opposing is the sharing of power. And, civil rights laws and protections, a lot of DEI programs are all about unlocking opportunities that were previously unlocked. And if folks really believed in merit, then you would want opportunities open to as many people as possible. And if, you are truly equipped, you compete on your merit. And I think what folks perhaps, even if not, outwardly or overtly have, recognized is that there are more qualified people in the world, and how many of the, positions, how many of, admissions, how many jobs, degrees, everything else, if you had to compete on merit, would actually be unearned by the folks that have historically held them. You don't get to, over 90%, white Fortune 500 CEOs because everyone competed fairly on merit. There's more going on there. And, where power could be hoarded, power could be not shared, folks could be systematically excluded, marginalized and oppressed. That is a system that works for some better than others. And you see it in the rhetoric of this administration and, the many supporters of it, that it is about, a resurgence to the good old days of white male rule. And we have to collectively be fighting back against that. When I said good old days with irony and air quotes.
Yes. No, I caught it in your voice, for the good old days, because of course the whole slogan was "Make America Great Again," kind of bringing back the I guess you could say the not hidden but hidden meanings all in it, and so as one of the things, that have been happening, obviously, because of such things as the mass deportations, we've seen people as protests and people gathering together. And so being that, maybe not here in the U.S., but globally, what is considered the minorities are the majorities of the world. I guess what has been keeping the people from gathering, I guess, together to not put up with this anymore? That's the thing. And one of the things that, I know not everybody thinks on the same page, but even couldn't, like, why, I guess, what's it going to take to gather people to I guess, fight against this, or to get to this point that we can look at, really change. Like, I feel like there's something that's holding people back. What have you seen that's holding people back from really, like, pushing forward to make these changes? Because there are more people who want these changes than not, I think, or maybe I'm being deceived by what I see.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And so, at Color of Change, part of, like, we're an organization that is driven by members, and, our role is, and the role that we've played, over these past 20 years has been to serve as a political home for Black people, and, to do so by providing people opportunities for strategic action that they can take on racial justice, demanding solutions and moving the ball forward. And so, I think, especially in moments like these, it's important not only, and I'm going to sound like a broken record and maybe a little bit cheesy, but, like, it's important to not only find the joy, right? Like, just to put in context, some of the most, like, lasting artistic pieces, some of the most beautiful literature, et cetera, by Black people have come out of pretty dark moments in history. And we've always been a resilient people, able to, channel our efforts and our energy into beauty, and make lemonade from lemons, when life, having given us the tools that we that we necessarily deserve, we've still always had all that we need. But in addition to the kind of finding the joy, finding your people, celebrating the things that are the wins, when we're taking on the fight, it's important to make sure that we are all fighting against the same people and for the same thing. And building that understanding, highlighting the harm, being caused by those, who are in front of us. Our government and the billionaires, running it at the moment are working right now to make sure, through the passing of these tariffs, the people that are going to be hit the hardest by that are, people of lesser means, are, Black and brown folks, lower income folks who are, on the front lines and less able to shield themselves from the impact of some of these tariffs. It is the small business owners who, require, their products and materials that they import from other countries, for parts or labor or otherwise. They are working double time to give themselves all a major tax break at the moment. While meanwhile, disinvesting and trying to shut down departments as critical as the Department of Education, which, provides so much necessary funding to our public school system. So much guidance and protection to our students in those school systems, and particularly for Title I schools and schools in, lower resource areas. But these are, actions that people, need, and part of the role Color of Change plays in our narrative work is providing context and providing the meaning, and really making sense of the moment so that people have a story of harm and a story of solution on justice.
Yes. And so once, everybody, is on the, getting everybody on the same page and really understanding, especially right now, because I feel one of the other things that's big in society is I'm sure you've seen on micro and macro levels is the I almost call it the brainwashing. Like nobody seems to know. They even question now, even if the planet is round or not. And so getting people all on the all the people on the same page is just key. And I think one of the things that you that I was digging a little bit deeper into what you were saying is that there is a getting people to kind of hope the same on and to kind of want to push together, because there's this thing I believe that a lot of people feel that they hold back because there's this uncertainty of maybe from like disappointments or what they've experienced, or could be a number of different things. But getting people all on the same page is, I would say, extremely difficult. And so with your organization, Color of Change, I guess right now, because I'm sure in the as we count down the days, it's been maybe I don't know if I should use heart-wrenching or maybe feeling that you're running like back and forth. What would you say has been, now that you see kind of how things are starting to unfold out here politically, what would you say your main focus is going to be during this year, I guess, because things are changing like left and right?
Absolutely. So Color of Change is unique for a few different reasons. But one of the primary ways that we are a little bit unique in the ecosystem is that we don't take corporate money. And that allows us to do a lot of corporate accountability work, and, demanding that not just government take action to hold corporations accountable, but, making demands directly on companies to change their practices and end their most exploitative practices and those that are harmful, most harmful to Black people and Black communities. And I say that because we are in a moment, especially where the federal government is signaling deregulation, where companies are really looking to, really potentially some of them are going to catch a windfall with the tax break. Others are going to have a field day in this, kind of deregulated environment, or this environment where where the federal government is not going to serve as the watchdog. It is up to us to kind of do what we can from a communications and organizing strategy. The intersection of like people and narrative is that ability to translate, and connect in real life and build that alignment over the long-term project and the longer-term goals. But also, in that corporate accountability space, combined particularly, we're focused a lot this year on the tax fight. We have, jumped in over the past couple of years, been building out and, carrying out campaigns that both are targeted towards the corporate lobby, but also around protecting direct file, which is essentially the IRS's public option, if that makes sense. And so direct file is the Affordable Care Act of taxes, whereas people used to have to go to private companies, to prepare their taxes. The government invested under the last administration a lot into providing a free alternative for many taxpayers. And so there are millions of taxpayers across 25 states that, because of this investment in direct file, will be able to cut out the corporate middleman, that was both preying on their data and their money, and be able to file and get their refunds directly with the government, saving, millions of dollars, at least 9 hours per person on average who uses the direct file system, that they will no longer need to spend doing their taxes. It's important for us to, continue and to be in the fight on this work, especially as ensuring this public option and engaging in the overall fight on the renewal of Trump's tax cut from 2017 are all connected about how democracy and government are supposed to work for communities, and particularly for Black people and Black communities. And, shining a lot of emphasis there. The other place where, we have been spending a lot of time and energy, look, at the inauguration, you saw all of the tech giants lined up on stage. They put governors in the other room to make space for, corporations on the stage, during the inauguration, which I think is a signal around, particularly for tech, what is to come with regards to the ways in which tech is able to write their own rules and, live by their own set of non-regulation and principles, mostly guided by innovation for innovation's sake and profit. And so Color of Change in December launched the Black Tech Agenda, which lays out a kind of comprehensive view and approach for how we view both the development of technology, what is required for oversight of companies, for the protections for individual data, and community autonomy on data, looking at the environmental impacts of tech development. And so we're going to be spending quite a bit of time this year working both at the state level and in our organizing, bringing folks together to build power around solutions for tech and its kind of permeation into all of our daily lives in ways that are much more protective and beneficial to Black people and Black communities.
Wow. And both of those are critical. One of the things I didn't even know about to me, it seemed like it should have been a common sense that you could file directly already with the IRS, that would have, to me, it makes common sense to get your money right away. And, and
that is why.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah. It's so common sense. I don't know why it wouldn't exist in the beginning.
Like, they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars lobbying against it because they, want our money and want our data.
Yeah, I just, to me, yeah, it's just been like common. We're making things so complicated, but I tend to be a very practical person. So to me, it would have made sense. All right, let's get the money. Let's see how much you owe. We give it back. We're done. Move on. Next person. But we like to complicate things, and then especially with technology, obviously technology is just going to keep growing and growing, and as you were talking about technology and then talking, not only about taxes, I started to see kind of that we are preparing for a different type of war, not a necessarily, physical combat war, but this is really like, a preparation of war on an intellectual, but also on a social but intellectual level. I guess, how would you say for individuals, for African American and Black individuals in the U.S., I guess, how should they prep themselves in these times of these maybe it looks like it's starting out like really difficult 4 years ahead? That was a tough question. I know. That's what I'll call my beauty pageant test. You can give me just three points that you can think of, because I think maybe you might want to say go to Bermuda or go to Bali and wait it out. Yes.
I'd be remiss if I didn't say go to colorchange.org and get involved. Find your people. Hopefully we can be your people. But really in this moment, find your people and ways to both, kind of protect your peace, protect yourself, but also take action and build up. I think the, kind of second, there's so much energy out there and the kind of building on the find your people. When you find your people, find the thing that you can do together that moves, the ball down the road, right? That, leaves us in a place, a little bit better off, or, a little bit that builds momentum, for racial justice a little bit more. And I guess the third thing, really, I guess, building on the both of those. So go to colorofchange.org, / find your people. When you find your people, take collective action. I think the third is like make it joyful, right? Like we have to remind ourselves of the wins. Even thinking November 5th was a devastating day for many of us who were hoping for an outcome that would allow for some more positive possibilities over these next 4 years. And while the outcome at the top was pretty devastating, there was some pretty great history made that day. If you looked at other parts of the ballot, there were, there was mass public support for ballot initiatives and protections around abortion, around, workers, around, economic justice. There were, 2 Black women elected to the Senate. There were like just all of these different things that if we frame the conversation, and this is why the power of narrative, if we frame the conversation around the law, we're doing that at the expense of the gains and the wins and just a different story that is still the story of what happened in November, but a story that is more representative and hopeful than just focusing on what didn't happen at the top of the ballot. And so finding that joy, that reframing, thinking of, what do you need in this moment to stay sane, and remembering that like chaos is the strategy and cruelty is the policy. And that's what, the right wants us to be: tired, overextended, miserable, hopeless. And the resistance, the like real resistance and like pathway is like remembering and just, refusing to let them keep us in that place.
I love that. Choose joy, and because it's definitely a different message than I think everybody is thinking. Because because I started out the conversation saying war, so definitely war and joy are complete opposites. But choosing joy, and and I guess what you would, if I were to say it's all about perspective and what we choose to focus on and make those things that are um, positive, all the wins that we did achieve, help those to continue to grow and to bring those to light. And like you've been saying, weave those in as that is the narrative, and, bringing that narrative to life to motivate people to continue to move ahead no matter, what obstacles and craziness is unfolding around them. Um, so I think that's a powerful answer, to keep people on the path and not to get distracted by, whatever craziness comes out each week. Because it seems, since we've been through this before, we kind of shouldn't be surprised that each week it's going to be breaking news. As that became the tagline that I remember from the last round. That was the tagline that I felt like I should get a T-shirt that said "Breaking News."
100%.
And so I just have a few more questions. And so I guess getting back to kind of the title of ensuring equity in America. First of all, what is equity? Because I don't know sometimes if people understand equity versus equality. So what is equity?
That is a really great question. The thing I immediately went to in my head was, the picture of the kids. Sometimes they're on crate. Sometimes, they're trying to look over a fence at a baseball game. But it's all about kind of what people need to compete, to compete on equal footing, right? Like to access opportunities equally. And so thinking about equity then as both strategy, so that the how you get to that future state, right? If that makes sense. What are the programs? What are the services? What are the protections? What's the legal framework? What are the and that equity is thinking holistically across the board about, what is good for everybody by taking into account, what individuals, particularly need to get to that place. I guess I'd, say, like, to me, equity and justice really go hand in hand. And so, as an organization that is a racial justice organization, and that does racial justice work where we view racial justice as a strategy and a mean to get to an end. The end that we are working towards is a more human and less hostile world for Black people and all people.
Yes, I like that, more a human world. I think everybody can definitely relate. There's we have hostility on all fronts, and especially for Black people receive the truckload. And so one of the things, I guess, when I guess do you feel that I don't know, within these times, do you think that equity can be achieved during these times?
I think it's a long-term project. I mean, we didn't get here overnight, and we won't kind of get to the side of this overnight. But sometimes the only way around is through. And so, continuing to kind of keep focused. When we are talking about equity, when we're talking about racial justice, what we're talking about is where systems serve people, not profit, right? When, race no longer determines access to access or outcomes, on things such as housing, education, healthcare. We know that we'll be on the right path when those things are no longer true, right? But the kind of pathway to get there, progress isn't necessarily about good intentions. It's about tracking outcomes. And, it's to your earlier question, why the deletion of data sets at many of these federal agencies that contain race or gender or other markers is so important, because we know that those with impure intentions will deny the existence of racism because they no longer will have the data to say, here's where things are unequal, here's where things are inequitable. But, we know that every disparity is a signal that we need to do more work, right? We know both through lived experience and engagement, through data, through research, that identifying the gaps and then developing the strategies and the benchmarks needed is important. Like, we know that when we're talking about equity, it sometimes can sound very abstract, but it actually is pretty tangible, right? Kids being able to eat, on a regular basis before they get to school, that they're able to, learn from updated and accurate textbooks about, not just U.S. history, but Black history, in particular. Having an equal shot of success, that families can, secure homes and futures for their children. Children can attend schools that are, equitably resourced, and, providing them with the tools that they need to, grow up, safe, secure, without fear. It's all of those things. And I do think that's possible, or at least making significant progress down the path, towards equity and really towards justice is possible in our lifetimes if we choose it. And I think we're at the crossroads where collectively we have to choose.
Yeah, the one word that kept popping in my mind as you were talking was humanity, and it's just about allowing equity and humanity being the same. That kept coming in my mind of that. If you have true equity, it lets you be the human that you should want to be or want to be. And so that is why equity is important, because in the end, it seems that, as you were explaining, that it just, it helps all of us because, it allows people to feel that, quote unquote, freedom of what it is to be, I guess, not to sound woo-woo, but a little bit alive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's, and so I don't know anyone on the whole planet that doesn't want that. And so hopefully in that answer that you gave, that people really understand equity a little bit more, that it allows everybody, not just certain groups, but just to feel alive. And that's, I think the number one thing, unless you're, totally out of the game, that we are all working towards. And so my final and closing question, I guess, if you, I guess I should think about how I phrase this, because I don't know. I feel like, as I said, we're in this movie. I guess if you were going to give advice to the new administration around equity and racial justice, and you could only give him a short answer, what would you give him as advice?
Reconsider.
I like that one word. That's a good one. It was straight to the point.
Yeah, or reconsider. And it's like self energy so that I wouldn't feel that I wasted it.
Sorry, I love that, That's probably wise considering, what we're up against. Yeah, keep answers really, really straight to the point. Reconsider. Well, thank you so much, Portia, for your time and insight. To learn more about Portia Allen Kyle, go to colorofchange.org. If you have a passion for an unserved community, a social justice problem, or want to change minds, contact Project Good Work at projectgood.org to start your project of change today. Subscribe to our mailing list at projectgood.org/subscribe to get our episodes and blog articles sent to you each month. To our listeners, thanks for tuning in to Project Good, where we're focused on what matters.